Well, first, let me start by thanking John, Melissa, and the other organizers of this conference. These are some pretty tough times right now, and I'm sure you've had to go through hoops to try to figure out how to move everything from physical to physical virtual to virtual. I hope someday there'll be an end to sight. We'll see. Um, so this is really a talk based on a book I wrote called Love-Based Culture. Now, when I first tried to figure out the title of this book, love wasn't the first word that came to mind, but what inspired the book was experiences that I had in having built a company that I think truly was love-based. That company got acquired by another company that was a big company. I mean, like, really big company. And I would say they have, like is the case with most big companies, they had a fear-based culture. So, I tried to think of, well, what's the opposite of fear? I actually went on Google and looked it up. And what I found was the opposite of fear was love. I put a little more deeper thought into it and thought, well, that's really the way I felt about this company. And I think the way a lot of other people felt about working there. So I decided to call the book Love-Based Culture, and I needed to get a lot of what I learned down on paper. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of that. I'm not going to go through all of the 10 principles. The actual total title of the book is The 10 Principles of a Love-Based Culture. So I'm going to go through at least 3 key aspects that all 10 of those principles link into, okay? But I'm going to start, with a story. I think one of the things that kind of got me down this path when I was young, grew up in Waco, Texas. Okay, now Waco used to be the kind of town that you just wanted to get the heck out of, okay, when you graduated from high school. They didn't have home improvement programs and stuff like that. They were based out of Waco. And I, in fact, did get the heck out of town, okay? And eventually I landed in the Bay Area of San Francisco, down in the Palo Alto, Mountain View area. For those of you who are familiar, Stanford University is out there in Silicon Valley, a lot of telecom companies. And I thought, I've got some skills with construction, not much. I needed to make a living. It's not cheap living out there. So I went to the store and bought the nail belt and some hammers and just started walking around to job sites. And in fact, there was a company that picked me up. I had no idea what I was doing, okay? I mean, I really didn't. The guy put me on a job of building sawhorses to start with. At the end of the day, I was still building those sawhorses. The next day, I was still building those sawhorses, but because I was the kind of guy that was there first thing in the morning and was the last guy out at night, the foreman decided to keep me on and would teach me. And so I learned a lot about construction. Eventually started my own entrepreneurial company, just a handyman service. I put a 2-page ad in the Palo Alto newspaper. It said, handyman, not 2-page, I'm sorry. I mean a 2-line ad, okay? It said, handyman, $10 an hour. And this was in the 70s, okay? So, $10 an hour for a kid like me was a lot of money. I had more work than I knew what to do with, so I changed my ad to handyman, $20 an hour. Still had more work than I knew what to do with, and eventually a telecom company that was local there, right across the street from Stanford University, picked me up and said, look, we're going to need you full-time here. And we need you sometimes to be doing handyman work around, our building. And sometimes we need you running this Xerox machine. This was the biggest Xerox machine I've ever seen in my life, okay? But they did a lot of copying. So one day I was running the Xerox machine, and a lady came in and said, hey, I need copies of this. And she handed me a piece of paper. And, I glanced at the paper. The paper actually had everybody's salary in the entire company. And I'm going, I think I took a peek at that and noticed the first name on this list was, guess who? The CEO of the company, a guy named Joe Zelikovic. I'll never forget his name, and you'll know why in a minute. So I thumbed through. I had a lot of friends that worked there. I was kind of curious how much money they made. Kept going, page after page, thousands of names on this list. And I got to the very last name, on the entire report. Guess who that was? Yep, me. Lowest paid guy in the whole company, But I was happy because I was making a living. I had a little apartment, a little studio apartment. I was eating. I was in my element, One day, the secretary of the CEO came up to me and she said, "Ivo, Mr. Zelikovich would like to talk to you." And I thought, oh my God, what'd I do? I was absolutely convinced I was going to get fired. So the day came, I went up to his office. Of course, you go into an office where the secretary is. That leads you to another office that goes into this conference room that looks as big as a football field, okay? I sit there for a minute, and in walks Mr. Zelikovich. He sits down next to me, and he says, "Ivo, what are you doing with your life?" I pause for a minute, and it's like, well, Mr. Zelikovich, I'm kind of making a go of it. I've got this little handyman service, it's working pretty good, staying busy. And he stopped me mid-sentence. And he said, "Ivo, let me tell you what you're doing with your life. You're wasting your life." I couldn't really respond to that. He just started talking, okay? He said, "Let me tell you what you need to do." He said, "You've got a reputation around here for the kind of work you do, for the quality, for your work ethic, okay? You need to go back to college, and you need to get a college degree. That's step number one. Step number two is go to work for a company that's got a good training program." Okay, got it, check. 3, then get a job doing your entrepreneurial work after you've kind of learned, what's going on and how to actually run a business from a company that really knows what it's doing. So, I walked out of his office and, I'm telling you, I could have sworn I heard angels singing in the background. I mean, it was an amazing feeling that someone like that would take a little bit of time out of their day for somebody like me. I just think about this for a minute, okay? I just want you to pause and think about this. The highest paid guy in that report, the highest paid guy took time out of his day for the lowest paid person in the entire company. Now, I doubt that he knew that, okay? I doubt that he knew that. I have since come to coin the term acts of love, that what he provided to me was an act of love that literally changed my life. Because 2 weeks later, I packed up my bags. I came back to Waco, Texas, helped my parents build their retirement home because I had the skills now, and went to Baylor University and got a business degree, and then off to the races, okay? Eventually becoming an entrepreneur and started many, many companies since then, okay? None of that would have ever happened without the act of love that Joe Zelikovich showed to me. So, years and years later, people frequently ask me the question, did you ever go back and find Mr. Zelikovich? I had at one point in my career, a very prestigious award called the Entrepreneur of the Year for the state of Texas in the category of technology. And I thought this is a kind of a crowning moment for me to get this kind of recognition. And so I tried to find him, and like back then they didn't have internet, they didn't have people search programs, they didn't have that stuff. I made a ton of phone calls and HIPAA and everything else. I could not find him. I'm pretty sure he probably passed away because he was kind of old at the time. But again, I will never, ever, ever forget the generosity that he showed. I have so much gratitude for what he did, and yet it was so small and yet so big, okay? So when I started writing this book, Love Bates Culture, I researched acts of love. I actually used social media. I sent out queries. I said, send me your stories. I want to know who else has had an experience where they've had an act of love in the workplace, and it made an impact on you. I got hundreds and hundreds of responses. Unbelievable. The stories, pages long sometimes, of experiences that people had. Sometimes just as simple as my boss called me into his office, told me I was doing a great job. I've never experienced that before. Many, many stories about bosses who went to a relative's funeral unexpectedly. You know, stories of bosses that seeked somebody out and took them to a tennis tournament because they knew they had a passion and a love for tennis. I'm telling you, these things went on and on and on. And there were, unfortunately, a handful of them of people said, I've never experienced an act of love in the workplace in my entire career. Okay, I put some of these stories at the end of each chapter in the book. I hope you have a chance to read it, okay? But the other thing that struck me as I was thinking back about this company that I'd had the opportunity to build was what really helped lead to this company being love-based. And one of the things that I landed on is this idea of success and how you actually define success. So many companies, the only definition they have success, and frankly, what was pounded into me all through my business, getting my business degree in college, was that the purpose of a business is, and this is like, quote, enhance shareholder equity, okay? Sometimes they say enhance shareholder value, sometimes they say enhance shareholder wealth, but it has everything to do with a return on investment, okay? I honestly would like to change that definition. I haven't quite landed on exactly what that definition is, but I don't like that definition. I don't like it at all. And being a guy who's helped build companies, building a company with the sole purpose being to enhance shareholder wealth is really not going to allow you to build a great company. It's not going to allow you to build the kind of company that people are going to look back on and say, I loved working there. I wished I could find a company like that now where I can work. So you know, where I landed was that it has a lot to do with this sense of purpose. You know, what is the purpose of a business? If you're in a business, what's the purpose of your business? Okay, we were fortunate to have had a lot of healthcare people in this, a healthcare consulting firm. Most of the people we had some kind of a clinical certification, nurses, doctors, pharmacists, people like that, okay? So it wasn't very hard for us to find that purpose. People really wanted to change healthcare. They saw the problems. They saw huge problems in healthcare, and they felt like this is a place where they could go to work and make a difference, okay? That was the purpose. Many other examples of other companies that have purpose, but if we set a goal of a purpose of a company, say we really want to make a difference, okay, and we want to make a difference in this way, it drives a lot of behavior from there in, okay? Now, the least of which is, how are you going to make money, okay? Because if you're not making money, then you have no purpose, okay? You go out of business. So the making money part of it becomes a byproduct of the fact that you have this purpose. This purpose is driving all of your processes. This purpose is driving the employees that you're hiring, okay? It's driving everything. It's the passion that makes everybody want to get up and go to work every morning. So one day, you know, we're off on a retreat, okay? You know how it is. You got a company, you're working for an organization, you go do planning retreats. We were at a planning retreat, early days of the company. And we said, what is our goal going to be for quality? And we kind of bounced it around, and finally, the chairman of our board at the time, a guy named Rod Canyon, he said, why would you want any level of quality that's not 100%? 100% of what? We decided that would be client referenceability. If our clients that we're working with will refer us to their clients, and in the healthcare industry, it is a very close-knit group of people. Trust me on that, okay? They talk to each other. So if you get a reference, that says you did a good job, okay? And that's not to say that projects don't go south on you, because they do. But it gives you a chance to fix it, maintain that client relationship, so as you go to the next project, and the next customer, you know, somebody's going to speak very highly of you. So we set that goal. We set that goal 100%. Not even a single client are we going to allow to go south on us. So I felt pretty good. Now keep in mind, you know, when you're at these retreats, Sometimes you're up in the mountain, you're getting high on nature, okay, you're having fun, so you can set goals like that. Eventually, you got to come back to the real world, okay? So, I'm sitting at my desk the Friday after this retreat, and I've got the notes from the retreat sitting in front of me, and my phone rings. I pick up the phone. It says, "Hey, Ivo, it's Chuck." Okay, well, Chuck was, fairly significant client, worked for a big insurance company up in the Northeast, okay? He was the CIO. And he said, "Okay, Ivo, I got to tell you, you guys aren't hacking it. We've got a problem here. I don't think it can be fixed. I think I got to bring in another company to help out." As he's talking, my eyes drift down, and the first thing they hit is this number, 100%. And in my mind, I'm going, oh man, what am I going to do? So I told Chuck right then, I said, "Look, go enjoy your weekend. When you come to work Monday morning, I'm going to be here in your office, and I'll be waiting. I know you're a busy guy. You might not be able to get to me right away, okay? But when you do have a moment that frees up, let's sit down and let's talk this through." And we hung up the phone. So sure enough, I flew in Sunday night, got there early in the morning, sat outside his office. He came walking in. I'll never forget the look on his face. He looked over, saw me sitting there, and he kind of gave me this come hither look. Okay, bam, we're in his office. He cleared his entire morning out. We spent the morning, and then we spent the afternoon mapping out what we thought the solutions, what a go-forward path would be. I stayed a couple more days to work with the team, make sure we kind of had it right. Got an airplane flying home, and didn't realize it at the time, but I do now. The repercussions of the fact that I had done that went through the entire company. The CEO was willing to get on an airplane and help go solve a problem because I was not going to allow any customer to not be referenceable. That's the commitment that I was making to this entire organization, okay? A few months later, we finished that project. I presented to the board of directors as a grand slam home run, okay? But had I not set the bar high, had that 100% not been there, I think I easily would have taken on this attitude, well, you can't win them all. There's always going to be that one customer that's going to go south on you, okay? The 100% drove me into an attitude like I had never experienced before. And let me tell you something else that I found. The employees totally embraced it. Why? Because they want to be associated with quality, high quality. They want to work for a company, and they want to work for an organization that they know has their back, because they're putting reputations out on the line every single day. The most important thing for them is that we are going to support them in the field, okay? I never realized that to the extent that I do now until we went through these experiences and I saw the reaction of the employees. Now, how does that relate to culture? Okay, it drives everything, okay? Now that we had a goal out there that said we're going to be 100% referenceable, all of our policies, procedures, processes, how we hired, how our quality worked, everything had to be aligned to making sure that we always had 100% referenceability. So, in the course of time, it wasn't easy. I mean, we had many clients. Many times I had to get out there and get in front of clients and say, we got to work this out. I'd explain to them, I said, I need to get you referenceable. That's a commitment I made to the company. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And when I say whatever it takes, I mean whatever it's going to take to make sure that happens. And in the course of this company's existence of 13 years, thousands of clients, thousands of projects that we did, okay, over that 13-year period, we never had a single unreferenceable client, not even one. It was not because of me. It was because of a culture that embraced high quality, that allowed us to be able to hire people who appreciated that and who wanted to be with the best, okay? They didn't mind putting in extra effort to make sure that we got it right, okay? And that every process that we had in the company was in aligned to make sure we hit that goal. Now, it's easy to say. What's an example of that, okay? I didn't have compensation programs that rewarded people for individual success. If that individual had success, that's great, but the odds are whoever it was had some help, okay? Because what a goal like this requires is teamwork. It requires people that are working together on a team. It requires problems to be solved in a team environment, okay? And that's exactly what happened. Is every time we had something that we had to go do as a project or a problem we had to solve, we had teams form around that. Never was there any one person that could take credit. So why would I pay somebody individually for that? The only thing I cared about was this: to what extent are you adding value to the company? As a team member, as a team leader, it didn't matter. And the people who we deemed added the most value were the ones who we wanted to pay the most money, okay? Sometimes you could have people in the middle of the organization that got bonuses that were as big as people in the top of the organization because of the huge impact that they made, okay? That's the sign, I believe, of a healthy culture. All for one and one for all, okay? Same for expense reports, okay? Our expense reporting guidelines were not designed around those few people who are going to break the rules. It was assuming that we could trust you, okay? And we did. And the employees would go out of their way to find ways that they could actually save the company the money because of the fact that we showed that we trusted them. So, you know, I did a little bit of research into the demographics of this group. And, you know, the fact is that family businesses represent about 70% of the businesses that are out there. In other countries, it actually goes up. In Asia, it's over 90%. Or not so family, but just small businesses is the way I would describe it. A lot of them are family businesses, okay? These are businesses where you have the power to define really what your purpose is going to be, and then where you're going to set the bar on quality. So I would encourage any of you out there that have that kind of influence on your company, you know, to take notes here and do your best to try to achieve that goal. So this sense of 100% was super important to our culture. The next thing was this sense of purpose, okay, and values. So you know, 70% of people working are unhappy. That's what the stats show, okay? 28% of respondents in this one study reported feeling fully connected to their company's purpose. I mean, they felt disconnected from their company's purpose. Okay, if the company was communicating what their purpose was, the huge majority of the employees, they felt connected, okay? If they didn't, then the employees did not, okay? So the sense of purpose and connectedness, they kind of go hand in hand, okay? Now, yeah, I learned this the hard way sometimes, okay? I'll give you an example. I had the chance to sit on the finance committee of a big Catholic healthcare hospital chain called Christus. So Christus, this I don't know if you guys have ever experienced Catholic hospital chains, okay? But at one time they were run by the nuns. You know, over the course of time, the nuns have been replaced by what you might call more professional business people, but they have not lost a lot of their influence on these organizations. They sit on the board, on the committee that I sat in, which was the most significant committee of the board, was chaired by a nun and had a couple of other nuns that were actually on the board. Okay, now they opened every meeting. They opened every meeting with a reflection, okay? And they rotated that amongst people who were on the committee. So, you know, I was new to this committee, and let me tell you, I have done presentations for as many as 10,000 people before. I've done thousands and thousands of business presentations, okay, in my life. nothing made me more nervous than doing this reflection in front of these nuns. I don't know why. I can just tell you, it kind of freaked me out. So I was nervous as all I could be. And when it was my turn, okay. And so I lost some sleep on it. Finally found a passage out of the book from Kahlil Gibran, the prophet, and that I thought would be relevant, and then read the passage on this reflection. But it made such a huge impact on me that I came back to my company and said, you know what? These guys have a way that they keep the mission of Christus above and beyond the financials, okay? And they do it through this constant reminder in these reflections that they do as a part of every single meeting. Now, some of you may have experienced this if you're a part of organizations like that. So I said, what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing with our core values. And we'd spent a lot of time developing core values. We actually had the employees, groups and committees and teams of employees create our core values. So I said, every meeting we have, we're going to open it with a discussion of a core value. So everybody, sometimes you carry a little card around that has core values on it. And each time we had a meeting, someone would pull one out. And we'd say, where did this work? Where did we do a good job here? And other times, we'd have to say, let's be honest with ourselves. Where could we have improved? And we had honesty. None of this took any more than really about 5 minutes. So we're not talking about extending the actual length of the meetings that we had. But it allowed people to never forget, and it put front and center the fact that we have values. And if we're not standing up and if we're not walking the talk of these values, then we need to be honest with ourselves about that, okay? And it made just a big difference. I would encourage anybody to kind of go through that process. It also reinforced in everybody's mind that we were a purpose-driven and a value-driven company. We were very open on the financials. We do all hands meetings once a month, and we totally reveal the financial statements. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good, okay? But that transparency made a difference, I'll tell you another story I read the other day that Legos, they have a kind of a purpose statement that says they strive for the development of children's creativity through play and learning. I thought, well, that's cool. It's little blocks, right? Everybody's played with Lego blocks. I had the chance for several years, actually. Had this probably like the coolest title ever. The country of Denmark asked me to be a healthcare ambassador for their country. So every year they'd fly me out to Denmark and they'd teach me about their healthcare system, so I could come back and be able to share some of what I learned with people in the United States. And trust me, they've got a really good healthcare system. They're a socialist country, a little easier for them, okay, but they do a lot of things the right way. One of the times that I was over there, I got in on a Sunday and I was just walking around. And I ran into this big building that must have been one of their offices, okay, because Legos is actually based in Denmark. The corporate headquarters are there. And in the window was a display. The display had all of these little Lego scenes that were done by little kids. Looked like, I'm going to guess, second, third graders. And each one of the scenes described something. One of the scenes said, this is my home. We raise our own vegetables. Just cool stuff out there as to how they were using the creativity that these Legos, little plastic blocks could do, to help influence these children's lives. That's a purpose-driven company when they can actually achieve, something like that. So we don't do nearly a good enough job of that, I can tell you. I think I saw a stat that said 80% of companies, when they surveyed the employees have no idea what the purpose of the company is, okay? And I know that's a grand thing, but you'd have to look at your own company and ask yourself if you've really kind of gone far enough. I did something kind of rude, a few months ago. I was asked to give a talk to a large group of healthcare people. And I noticed that there were 3 healthcare systems that were kind of the members, the people who were coming. It's a regional conference. The people who were coming, there were 3 of these healthcare systems that made up a good part of, the people who were attendees there. So I went to each of their websites, and they had their core values listed out. So I printed off the core values, and I took it to put it on a slide and popped it up there for everybody to see, and says, anybody recognize these? Not a single hand went up. Popped up the next one. Anybody recognize these? I'm just curious. These examples, some core values, Nobody. Third one, nobody. We had hundreds of people at this conference. Not a single one of them had any idea what their organization's core values even were. Okay? And yet, here we are wanting to build these great cultures. I gave them some advice, too. I'd say the same thing to you, because a lot of you may well not be in a position where you can change the values of your company. But what you can do is create awareness of what those values are. I told them, invite your CEO to your next team meeting and tell him you would like to discuss core values. You guys would like to understand them better. I said, I can guarantee you that CEO has never been asked that question before. Never, okay? Whoever he or she is would be honored to be able to go and actually have that discussion. And I don't know, frankly, if anybody ever followed up on that, but I would tell you, okay? And I hope you do, okay? Because it will make a difference. So we talked about quality in this 100% rule, the importance of this sense of purpose to culture, okay? Now let's talk about the third and last one I'm going to talk about, which is what I'm calling awareness amongst you and the leadership of what organization you're with, okay? Self-awareness, I ran into a study when I wrote the book that 85% of people are not self-aware. 85%. The 15% are. So you got to ask yourself the question, are you in the 85% or are you in the 15%? Well, the odds are you're in the 85%, right? That's just, that's just reality, and as much as nobody wants to admit it, it's not unlikely that how you think of yourself and the type of person you think you are may not be connected to how others see you, which may not even be connected to who you need to be, okay? So this idea of self-awareness is important to a culture, because otherwise you're just kidding yourself, okay? You may think of yourself as being an authentic person, but perhaps you are not, okay? And this especially applies to the leaders of the company, okay? Because if they aren't in that 15%, then they're just reading some kind of manual and checking the boxes, okay? They're not really providing leadership from their heart, which is where true leadership is going to come from, okay? So what do you do? How do you become self-aware? Frankly, it's going to be different for everybody, okay? For me, I don't know that I was self-aware for a good part of my career, frankly. I learned a lot about myself later in my career, and some of those lessons came the hard way. Okay, one of them, and I'm going to tell you this story. Okay, so if you're drifting on me, this is going to snap you back, okay? Because this is a romance. This is a romance story. How often do you go to a business conference like this, even though it's an online speech, okay, and you get a romance story? So anyway, I was with this company I've been talking about, okay, got acquired. I'll tell you who it was, got acquired by IBM, okay. IBM's a great company, but they have fear-based cultures just like all the big companies have. And I was leading the healthcare provider business for IBM on a global basis, okay. It took me all over the world. I was getting on an airplane every Monday morning, and I was flying sometimes over a course of 2 weeks. I'd hit 7, 8, 9 countries, okay. It was a burnout. And it ultimately led to a divorce. So still had a teenage daughter at the time. She was in middle school, and so I would, spend as much time as I could with her. But when I got the divorce, it really was, a wake-up call. I built a house, what I call golf cart driving distance from my ex-wife, so my daughter could zip back and forth without a problem. And one day, after I had remodeled this house, and I bought this house, I was gone all the time. I gave this decorator a blank check and just, hey, just make it so. I'd come home, like pictures up on shelves of, the pictures that they come with the frame. They're pictures of somebody else's pets, some other happy couple. Okay, I hadn't even gotten as far as even trying to make it my house. Okay, I just needed a place to live. And keep in mind, I was the guy who everybody looked to as being successful. I mean, truly successful. I had, sold my company, had made substantial amounts of money. I could buy anything that I wanted to buy. I had a tremendous reputation. I was the guy that everybody says got the golden snake. Everything he touches turns to gold, okay? That's how I identified myself, as that guy, okay? And yet, one day when I came home, drove up into my driveway on a late Friday night, and I walked into my living room, and everybody knows what the smell of fresh paint, fresh carpet is, It's got a very unique odor to it. I took a whiff and I could smell that and could look out on this beautiful scene. House was sitting on a lake, all glass windows. And I stood there for a minute, and the tears just started pouring down my eyes because I realized how lonely I was. I realized that even though I had everything that a man could want in the eyes of society, I had lost everything that mattered to me. I had lost my family, and I had lost, my wife, who, we had gone through some tough times, but I still loved her. I put my daughter in a difficult situation. I actually fell down on my knees as these tears were flowing down my eyes. And I'll never forget this next moment where I swear if there was a God experience, something hit me like a lead balloon. I mean, it was just like a bolt of lightning coming down and waking me up. And there were two messages that came along with that. You got to get her back, meaning my wife. And the second message was, you got to apologize to people who you were rude to because of your arrogance. And I just kind of went, okay. I quit IBM, and I started down this path of this, get the girl back, okay? So you think, well, okay, how do you do that, okay? Because you've got to fall back in love. I have to get her to fall back in love with me. And I had this tiny little problem in that she had already started dating this other guy, okay? So I'm like, I just got to do what I got to do. Greatest marketing program ever in the history of my life, okay, was this romance. So I'd put a card. She was actually CEO of a little hospital in our town where we live, a little 100-bed hospital. And every day, I would go put a card in her windshield that would have a memory sometimes. Sometimes it'd be a poem, always a love note, okay? I'd go find these blank cards that had nothing on the inside, and then I would just write something in it. I did this every single day, okay, for weeks and weeks and weeks and a few months. If she was going out of town, her secretary was kind of on my side here because, she and I always got along. Her secretary would tell me where she was going. I would mail the card to her hotel so she wouldn't have to go that day without getting a card. So, both of us needed some time off. Relationships are hard, okay? Everybody watching this right now, you know how hard it can be, okay? take two type A personalities, and these things can happen. So, finally, I called her up and asked her out on a date. Got all dressed up in a suit, went and got some flowers, did it the right way. Walked up to the front door, rang the doorbell. My old house, okay. She answers it. She takes one look at me and bursts into tears. So that was 20 years ago, and we've been immensely happy for that entire time, okay? But it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had my ego blown to bits, okay? This does relate back to culture, trust me on that, okay? Because you need to know who you are, as a person in that culture and as someone leading that culture. You need to have some authenticity. Everybody has worked, I'm sure, in a culture that had a bunch of egomaniacs in there. Most of them are not self-aware, have no idea that you think that they're a narcissist, okay? In order for me to break out of that, it took a dramatic event, okay? It took a dramatic event of getting divorced. It took that lightning bolt coming down and waking me up. But it took all of that for me to realize who I am. And once I got a sense for who I am, then it allowed me to go through a healing process of sorts so I could become a complete person. Actually, the next year went off to Spain. They have a hike there called the Camino de Santiago. It's a very well-known hike. Anybody that's a hiker's probably heard of it. But it's a pilgrimage, and in fact, if you do a certain amount of the hike, you actually are declared a pilgrim. They give you a pilgrim certificate, okay? For people who do the whole thing, it's 500 miles, okay? So we're not talking about just a little walk in the park, okay? We're talking about a month or more of hiking. I went over there for 3 different years. I've been over there and done some sections of it, but in the last year I did it, I went alone. I went alone for a reason, okay? I went alone because I wanted to spend time with me and making sure that I was grounded, that I was centered. I'd be walking down a path in the middle of the countryside, and I'd just stop and I'd look up and I'd say, I'm going to release the baggage. I went through every year of my life thinking about where I may have accumulated some baggage, and every person who I had known or knew today, and if I felt like they had done me wrong, I forgave them. And if I felt like I had done something wrong, I forgave myself. And by the time I finished that week of hiking, I felt like I had lost a lot of baggage, that I was a whole person, that I was grounded, and at least I had taken one step closer to being in that 15% of authentic people, who had self-awareness. It's my belief that if you want to have a healthy culture, the best thing you can do is focus on you, okay? That's the best thing you can do. Otherwise, you just end up spending your career pointing fingers at all the other people out there that you think are screwing things up. So I'm going to finish with that story because it's a story I love, okay? The story of getting married and getting remarried. By the way, this breakup lasted for 9 months. It started in March and it ended in December. So the IRS never recognized that we were ever even divorced, but it probably was one of the greatest experiences I ever had in my life, in helping me to be a person that I think took a step closer in finding out what my purpose is. And a part of that purpose is me now, I think, talking to each one of you. And in my quest is the case with everybody of just, finding happiness in your life. So my last words of wisdom to you is this. You remember how I opened up this talk with the CEO of the telecom company, Joe Zelikovic? Spent a little bit of time out of his day for a nobody like me, and it changed my life, okay? I ask each one of you to be Joe Zelikovic. Take a little bit of time. Take a little time at work to help somebody that you think may need some words of encouragement, okay? Do something special for somebody that they would never, ever expect. You'd be amazed the difference you'll make in somebody's life. Thank you again for the time.